Now, we hear a lot of information coming out of the CBO, that's the Congressional Budget Office. And if you notice, the corporate media likes to throw this organization in everyone's face saying, well, with Obamacare, if Obamacare is repealed, 32 million people are going to lose their insurance. And during each of these processes, this is what we hear. Even with the budget and everything else, they make all different types of forecasts. Now, when we start to look at their track record of forecasts, we see that things aren't that awesome with the CBO. I mean, their track record is almost as good as the Federal Reserve here. Now, if we go back in time and we look at Obamacare and the number of enrollments they were forecasting, I should say, going back to 2014, 2015, they said, well, in 2014, there's going to be 6 million people. 2015, it's going to hit about 13 million people. Midway through 2015, we're going to hit 22 million people, and it's going to look fantastic. Now, that was the CBO predicting all this back in 2010 for all these years. Then they went ahead and they revised their numbers. And if we look at the CBO of 2016, they said, well, it looks more like about 19 million people are or 18 million people are going to be joining Obamacare. Well, actually what has been happening since 2014, 6 million people joined. It went up to 10 million, and the actual numbers have been declining ever since. 10, 11, 9, and most likely we're at 8, going down to 7. And it's continually declining at this point. And what we're seeing is that their forecasts are absolutely terrible, and they really don't understand what the American people are doing or what they really think of Obamacare and why they're not actually taking this health insurance. And it's completely obvious. It's just too expensive. There's no benefit to the people. Yes, there is some benefit to a small group of people, especially those individuals that are getting subsidized. Anyone that's getting subsidized, it's fantastic because you're not paying anything out of your own pocket. And if you are paying something, it's so minuscule that, yeah, I'm going to love it. But the majority of the people, guess what? They're left out in the cold, and they have to pay that gigantic bill. And this is why people are looking at this saying, it's not working. So when we hear these terms CBO and their forecasts and how many people are going to lose this and how many people are going to lose this, well, we really shouldn't just take this at face value. We should look at their track record and see what they really forecasted in the past. Now, we're starting to hear that more Russia propaganda is coming out. And I don't know about you, but it's becoming a little tiresome and a little ridiculous after a while, because all we hear is Russia, 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 and these corporate media news outlets, they keep pushing propaganda, and as we find out that none of these stories are actually true. A lot of them are just made up. They all turn out to be nothing burgers, and even if there was something there, they're really not against the law. And the latest one is with Jeff Sessions, and of course this is coming out of the Washington Post, saying that, former Russian ambassador Sergei Kislyak, had 2 conversations with Jeff Sessions, and they were intercepted by the NSA, which was monitoring the communications of senior Russian officials in the U.S. and in Russia. And the bigger question is, once again, how do they know it's Jeff Sessions unless he was unmasked? And we're back to the same exact question once again. Who ordered this? Who ordered the unmasking? Was Obama indeed spying on the Trump campaign? And that is all turning out to be absolutely true. And when we drill down to all of this, what do we really see? Well, according to the Washington Post, they waited until the end of the story to disclose one key detail about Kislyak's report to his superiors concerning his meetings with Sessions. According to Kislyak, Sessions didn't discuss anything that could have influenced the election. Nothing here fits in with the Don Jr. collusion narrative, and more importantly, there's no way to corroborate Kislyak's characterization of the meeting. Apparently, he really doesn't take such meticulous notes like FBI Director James Comey. And we have to remember, part of any ambassador's job is to meet with lawmakers, promote your country's agenda, and this is exactly what Kislyak was doing. He was meeting with many different lawmakers, but the question always comes back to the same thing. Where did they get the information about the conversation? How do they know it's Jeff Sessions? Who did the unmasking? Was Obama spying on the Trump administration? And that all turns out to be true. Now, Sarah Flores, the spokeswoman for the Justice Department, says, listen, I cannot comment on the reliability of what anonymous sources describe, especially this coming out of the Washington Post, because there's nothing here. It's all anonymous. There's no meat to it. And once again, there's nothing here. It's a nothing burger. It's a waste of time. But the corporate media, they just don't want to let up on this. Now, a more important story is the Trump dossier and how they faked and created this dossier and how this Fusion GPS pushed it out there to make everyone believe that it was real. I mean, think about what they did. Now, Glenn Simpson and Christopher Steele, the two that were involved in this, and remember, Glenn Simpson was a former Wall Street Journal reporter who now runs the Fusion GPS, and he's the one who compiled the dossier, and Steele wrote up the dossier, and this was all unverified. Now, the Senate wanted them to testify, and of course these two are saying, well, our schedules and this and that will be traveling. So it looks like they're going to be subpoenaed. Now, if they are subpoenaed, it looks like they're going to plead the fifth, because if they testify, it's all going to come back on them, and this will be a scandal that will be ripped wide open. And this is when we go down the path of, why did you do this? Who else was working with you? Who paid you to do this? And once they start following the money, once they start following everything, you know most likely where this is going to lead, all the way back to the Clinton campaign. And this is why they're going to avoid all of this. And we see right now that most of the information that the Senate wants, well, it's coming from these individuals. And it looks like they are going to decline the subpoena. They're going to plead the fifth. And they're going to say, listen, we're invoking all of this because we have nothing to say. Now, Susan Rice, she met privately with the Senate Intelligence Committee, and none of the information is really coming out, but she did meet with them behind closed doors, and they discussed, the unmasking and what actually went on. But again, it's not out in the public like all the other hearings. Now, we see Mike Pompeo, the CIA director right now. He is out there and he is going after WikiLeaks. He is saying that WikiLeaks is plotting to take down America any way they can find, any willing partner to achieve that end. And the question is, what is he so worried about? Is he worried that the American people will find out the truth and will take the intelligence agency down, will take down parts of the government if the truth is out there? Actually, Assange tweeted out there saying, what sort of America can be taken down by the truth? This is what they're really afraid of. The truth getting out there and people really learning what the government, what the intelligence agencies were really up to over all these years. And this is why they're trying to stop this type of organization. You have to remember, Trump, when he was campaigning, he actually said, I love WikiLeaks. And now all of a sudden, the CIA, everyone is looking at WikiLeaks saying, no, we need to stop this because something behind the curtain, something behind there, they're very much afraid of. Now, it looks like the U.S. is out there, the U.S. National Intelligence Director Daniel Coats, and he is out there saying, listen, Kim Jong-un, he's not crazy. He makes rational decisions to ensure the survival of his regime. He says, our assessment has resulted in the fact that, well, he's a very unusual type of person, but he's not crazy. What he's doing is he's protecting his country. He understands that nuclear weapons, they are a deterrent to keep other countries from invading or having regime change in countries. This is why he's sticking to nuclear weapons. And once again, he's not going to launch a nuclear weapon at the United States. It would make no sense whatsoever. It looks like what he's doing, like every other country, he's protecting his country, he's protecting his reign, and this is the only way he knows how to do this, because remember, he's seen what the deep state has been doing all throughout the years, where they go into Libya, they've gone into Yemen, they've gone into Sudan, they've gone into Lebanon, Iraq, now in Syria, Ukraine. He sees all of this, and this is why he's rushing now to get nuclear weapons to stop the deep state from invading his country. That's exactly what's happening. He's not a crazy person. He knows what is about to happen here. Now, the EU is sounding the alarms because what we're seeing right now is Congress, the Senate, they are pushing a new U.S. sanction bill on Russia. And the EU, they're very upset about this. Now, this new bill will allow Congress to pass all of this, and it will take away the veto power of the president. Now, the European Union is sounding the alarm, saying that the U.S. Congress needs to stop what they're doing. They're urging Washington to keep coordinating with the G7 partners. The European Commission warned of possible wide and indiscriminate unintended consequences, especially on the EU's effort to diversify energy sources away from Russia, adding that unilateral measures by the U.S. could undermine transatlantic unity. Now, the House is set to vote on the legislation on Tuesday, and Brussels is urging Washington to consider European interest, especially in the energy sector. They also warned that the threat of fining European companies participating in the Nord Stream 2 project introduces a completely new, very negative dimension into European-American relations. And they're saying that, listen, Europe will control how Europe gets their energy, not the U.S. It's none of their business. And we can see there's a lot of countries right now, they're not agreeing to these sanctions anymore on Russia. The whole thing is falling apart because these sanctions, as we discussed before, they don't hurt the United States. They hurt Europe. And they're seeing this, and they're done with it. And this is why they're saying it's enough. This is not going to help anything. But we can see right now the deep state, they're still putting pressure on Russia. Now, the Syrian army, they have resumed their offensive operations in the southeastern countryside of Al-Raqqa Governorate. They are pushing eastward to the Euphrates River. And we can see they're just pushing the Islamic State out. They liberated a lot of villages where the Islamic State held these villages, captured them, and the Syrian armed forces, they have pushed them out now, and they're continually pushing eastward. Now, what's very interesting is that the CIA is out there, and they admitted that they just didn't arm the moderate rebels and the terrorists. They actually paid them monthly salaries. Now, we discussed this going way, way back, that they were paying them a monthly salary. They were giving them all the supplies. And it's funny how all this information is coming out right now. But again, if we go back in time, the alternative media at that time would be fake news, and the corporate media would be real news, where they're saying that, no, we're not paying salaries. No, we're not supporting the terrorist groups, the moderate rebels. And now, again, once again, that is fake news, and the alternative media is the real news. Now, we see the Pentagon is out there saying that the Syrian government, they have not used chemical weapons since April, since Trump launched the missiles into Syria. Now, I have a little correction here. Assad didn't use chemical weapons at all, even during that period of time. He hasn't used chemical weapons since they removed the chemical weapons from Syria. The United States, Russia, the coalition forces, the UN, they all signed off on this, and all these chemical weapons that we've been seeing being used throughout Syria. It's the terrorist groups. It's the terrorist groups that were supported by the intelligence agencies. Now we see U.S. Special Operations Commander. He is out there and he admitted that having the U.S. stay in Syria for a long period of time runs contrary to international law, and Russia, they would be entirely justified in questioning the U.S.'s presence in Syria. Now, this individual is Special Operations Commander Chief Army General Raymond Thomas, and he was asked a question whether American forces will remain in Syria after the Islamic State is defeated to support the Kurdish forces. And he's saying that, listen, we're only in this country to fight terrorism. Actually, we're in this country, which is a sovereign country with an elected president, and we have no ability to stay in this country. And I'm going to take this a step further. We have no right to be in this country because the sovereign country's leader never invited the United States in. And he's saying that this would be completely against international law. And he went on to say, we are operating in a sovereign country. The Russians, they are there by request of the Syrian president. And we can see that if Russia and Syria say, listen, why is the U.S. still in Syria? And if Russia does play this card, well, the U.S. is going to have to leave because under international law, they have no right to be there. And it's nice to see that someone in the armed forces is really looking at the situation, and we all know that they know this, that they actually admit that they're really not supposed to be there. Now, Assad, he is out there saying, listen, no one invited the U.S. to Manbij. No one invited any of the foreign troops into Syria. They didn't get any permission whatsoever. And these are foreign invaders. And these foreign forces, including those from the U.S. that enter Syria without invitation, are invaders. And most of these individuals, most of these troops, they need to leave. And we can see already, there's already calls where the coalition forces must leave the country. Now, Syria is taking this to the next step here. They're saying they want the U.S. and its illegitimate coalition to pay for all the infrastructure they destroyed. They're already at the UN, and they want the U.S. to pay for all the damage. Almost like after World War II, where the German people, the German government there, had to pay all the countries for the damage they created on all the countries. Now it looks like it's the U.S.'s turn, the deep state, where they're saying, listen, you were here illegally, you destroyed our infrastructure, and you need to pay for it. Now, this might even turn into war crimes as we move forward, because as more of this information comes out, remember, the losers, the ones who really weren't supposed to be there, well, everything flashes back on them. And we're starting to see this happen right now, because now we have Syria, most likely other countries, going to go to the UN and start saying, listen, the U.S. needs to pay for all this. Look what they've done to all of these countries. Now, again, where does this all go back to? It goes back to the people. Now, we didn't elect, we didn't vote for this to happen. This was being done through the deep state covertly. And once again, these individuals were lying to the people of the United States of why we were there in the first place. So again, we can see what's happening. Now, while this is all happening, what we see happening is that America is now losing its grip on the Middle East. Now, we talked about this quite often, where as the U.S. loses its grip in the Middle East, these countries are going to go off on their own. And this is exactly what they've been doing. They've been moving towards Russia, China, and Iran. Now, while the U.S., the deep state, was so busy having regime change in all these countries, China, quietly, well, they were working with the Syrian government. Russia's working with the Iraqi government China's working with other governments in the Middle East, and so is Russia, where they're building economic ties and they're making deals where these countries are going to be looking to Russia and China and Iran to invest in the Middle East, not the U.S. We also see that Syria and Iran, they are on the map to join China's new Silk Road. One belt, one road. And they're going to be a transit route from East Asia to the Middle East, and it will impact not only Syria and Iraq, but also Iran, Turkey, Libya, Lebanon, and the rest of the countries. And the U.S. left out in the cold. And this is a major problem. Now, Russia, as we discussed before, they're getting a contract to supply T-90 tanks to Iraq. Since they got involved in Syria, these countries have seen their weapons, and they're looking at this saying, wow, they're highly effective. We want some of those. So once again, the U.S. is being left out in the cold. Everything the deep state has done has destroyed the U.S. And now it's going to flash back upon us. Now we have no manufacturing in this country. We have no trade deals with any of these countries. Globalism is withering away. And all of these countries are going to look to make economic deals. We better get on board, or we are going to be isolated. And we will be isolated because of what the deep state, what the neocons, and what all these individuals have been doing all throughout the past many, many years. The world is changing right now. And if we don't get on board with this change, the rest of the world is going to change without us. And I believe this is what Trump is trying to do. This is why he's trying to establish trade. This is why he's trying to bring back manufacturing. This is why he's trying to stop the wars in all of these countries. This is why he's trying to work with Russia. Yes, is everything perfect? Absolutely not. Think about it. Years and years and years have gone by with the deep state, the neocons, and all these individuals messing all of this up. And it's just one gigantic, tangled up mess that has to be untangled, and everything has to be put straight. Now, how do you do this? You can't do this in a couple of months. It's completely impossible. I know people are out there saying, well, everything has to come back here. Really? It took years and years and years for everything to be moved away. Do you really expect everything to be back to the way it was? Where manufacturing's all back in this country? Where we're bringing and making America great again? It's impossible. We're going to have to start from the bottom and work our way up. We're going to have to work with other countries. We're going to have to work with the new trade system that's evolving right now, and other countries are joining. We're going to have to do all this and get rid of regulations and the rules, get rid of the central bank. The people have to take back the country, because there was a time where the U.S. was great, and then we let it slip away because we fell asleep. And the founding fathers have said this to us once before, that they've given us our freedom. They've given us this period of time, and they knew it wasn't going to last forever, because they said to us that we're going to have to fight for this once again. And here we are. It's time to take everything back, because the world is changing. Everything is changing. We see the cryptocurrency world coming into view. The old central banking system is moving out of view. We're seeing something new emerge, and it's time to get on board. It's time to see that we can do things without the deep state. We can do things without the neocons. We can do things without the central bank. And we can have government work for the people once again. This is the direction we need to head into. This is what we need to do. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks.